Hello, my name is Will Prince, Director of Development and Membership with the Louisiana Trust for Historic Preservation. In this video, we will be featuring a profile on preservation, telling the story and background of a successful preservation project in place. Today, we'll be chatting with Cassie Condrey Lansing, owner of the Bernard House in Lake Providence. Hi, Cassie, how are you?
Hi.
Before we kind of get into our little chat today, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. I grew up here in Lake Providence, which is the very northeast corner of the state. I left at 17 and went to college and then got my master's and then traveled around the world for a while before moving back here with my husband. And we now have a 2-year-old. I serve as president of the local community board called Doorway to Louisiana, which also focuses on preservation, and as well as, of course, the Louisiana Trust. Yeah. What else?
Great. So Lake Providence itself, could you tell us a little bit more about its history? It's kind of, you mentioned it's where it's geographically, but just give us a little more background on what Lake Providence is and its preservation history.
Okay. Yeah, so Lake Providence was originally Providence, and it was located right on the Mississippi River. The town moved a few times before finding its current home. In about 1849 or so, maybe I think it was incorporated where it is now, maybe in the early 1850s. It was really a bustling place based on our location on the river. We had a really active port, which we still have. And then it was agriculturally very rich. So, we have that whole history, which remains really prevalent today. Agriculture is our main economy. But, with that history it's complicated. We were in 1996, we were named the poorest town in America by Time magazine. Later, CNN did a profile on us, calling us the most unequal place in America. Whether or not we deserve those particular titles, I'm not sure, but the problems that gave us those names are certainly real. But a lot of people, having grown up here, there is a real sense of community, and that's one of the things that brought me and my husband back, as well as a belief that, time shows that things ebb and flow. So we were once a really wonderful place to live, and with a lot of opportunities, and believe that it could be that way again. So we do have a local historic district that was established in the 80s, and we're now a cultural district, but included in those are some really amazing downtown commercial buildings that are in various states of disrepair, but there's been a lot of energy lately around rehabbing those buildings and restoring and preserving them. And then we have a few homes that are quite amazing from the 1800s that are along our main street called Lake Street.
Okay. And then could you tell us, so we're going to talk about the Bernard House in particular today. Could you tell us a little bit more about that property, its history, its architecture, and how did you find the property? How did you come across it?
So it's a small town, and if you're at all into old things, you know all of them pretty quickly. So I knew that house very young. It had been empty actually for 30 years before I was even born. So by the time we got it, it was really probably closer to being condemned than being restored. But I had always loved it, even when I was, as soon as I got my driver's license, I used to go there and crawl through it. I knew every inch of it. And even though there were critters living in it, and anyway, we ran across a lot of things in the process of restoring it. But the house is Greek Revival center hall with 4 rooms, and then it has a back wing off the back porch that we're told was the doctor's studio. It was built by a really prominent family in town at the time in 1884, the Bernards. They're all actually buried in the local cemetery, which I'm also in charge of, which really is an amazing historical site. And I got to know a lot about them, the family, in the process of working on the house. Just they were pharmacists and doctors and really well educated. The doctor who built it, his letters are archived at Ole Miss, which is where he went for his undergrad degree, and back home to his mother. So she, along with his mother, along with him and his wife, they built the house in 1884 and lived in it until, we believe, around the 1920s, when his wife Estelle passed away and it was sold.
So, other than scouring through the property when you were young, what were some of the first steps you did prior to purchasing the property? Did you do any background research or any other things to prepare for the purchase of the property?
One thing I did first was call Brian Davis, who is the director of the Louisiana Trust, just to get his eyes upon it and give me some advice about how to move forward. And, it wasn't much of a decision for me in terms of buying it or not. I didn't really have to do a lot of research. I didn't really care. I just had always loved the house, and it was a dream to be able to get it. But I did go down the rabbit hole of old archives of our newspaper here, finding everything I could about the family. And then, even before the house was built, there's old maps, the Sanborn maps that are in our local courthouse. And, I saw where it was labeled garden, and it was actually Sarah, who was the mother of Dr. Bernard. It was her garden before they built the home on it. So that's mostly what I did. And then just tried to dream about what I would do with it. It was mainly, it was a really creative process more than
Great. So, taking on this long-time vacant property, what were some of the first steps you did in renovation? And were there any specific tools or resources as part of that renovation process?
I would say the first thing I did was make a really good list of things not to touch, for contractors not to touch. You first in this place have to get it cleaned up, which is actually a bigger process than I imagined that it would be. It took longer, it cost more, and all of that. So kind of labeling, like, under no circumstances should you touch the windows. Under no circumstances should you mess with these floors, because they look horrible, but they need to be sanded, and that's about it. The old fireplaces, things like that, just making sure that the crew was aware of what we were trying to do. As far as tools, I would say people were the best tools. I found a really amazing carpenter in South Louisiana who came up and worked on our windows and got them all of the original windows functioning again, which was a major feat. But he did it with real love and care, and he worked with us in ways that were just admirable and heartwarming, because there are definitely parts of restoration and any renovation, any job that involves contractors and subs and all of that are, hard to manage. And so he was a real bright spot. And photographing it, really good photographs that could show us then and there. There are times you kind of skip over that. You get in the middle of it and you forget to document the steps. You think you'll remember it all, but you don't. So.
Were there any challenges that kind of stood out during this process? You mentioned, finding good contractors and things like that, but was there a moment where, something wasn't sure if it was going to work or go in the right direction?
Actually, I probably mentioned the window carpenter because he's an expert really, because the windows were a huge thing. Everyone was advocating for us replacing them. It seemed unlikely that we were going to get them all functioning, and for ease of heating and cooling and efficiency and things like that, a lot of people recommended that we replace them. And then we thought we found someone to work on them, and he ended up really not being capable. So that was one of the biggest challenges, because those windows, along the front, they go up into the ceiling, so you can actually walk underneath them. And it was one of the things I loved most about the house from the very beginning. So that part was, at times, felt a bit hopeless. It made me feel a bit hopeless to think I wasn't going to be able to preserve that. And then probably feels like the biggest win also. Yeah, and otherwise I think, yeah.
Okay. And then let's see. And then are there any other tips or renovation, guidance that you learned from this particular project?
I think probably, so I had a daughter in the middle of this restoration, and I would not recommend that. That's a tip that I would say. Undergoing a major life change in the middle of it was challenging. But one of the greatest things that I did learn was how to keep my own timeline that is separate from a contractor's timeline. So to really have a good grasp on at what point what needs to happen allowed me, well, I should say now has allowed me in other projects to have a better handle on where we should be in the process, what I can do to speed things along, and what needs to be given due time. Some things really don't need to be rushed, can't be rushed. For example, bringing in the person to restore the wood floors. They were original to the house, and that is kind of perfect timing when that person comes in. So really having a sense of how the flow goes on a job site is something that I learned and, wish I had before. It might have gone a little bit smoother, but you learn. So one way that this project really does work is that we were able to get tax credits for it. We were able to get the federal historic tax credits. Now if we would have done it later, we would also be eligible now for the state too, since we're now a cultural district, but Bernard House came before that. So, and that process is long and a bit cumbersome and at times really overwhelming, but like everything, it is just one step at a time. And if you can take it that way, it makes things possible that maybe weren't before. And I'm grateful, there are people out there who know a lot about it and are willing to share their time and energy and to tell you about it, because it does make projects like ours possible.
While you were cleaning out and renovating, were there any discoveries or like hidden memorabilia or family heirlooms that you found, whether it be a document or something within the house?
Well, we actually found a lot of old newspaper articles and, really old newspapers and things like that. And I loved seeing the layers of wallpaper that had been put on over the years. But this actually wasn't a discovery because I had discovered this when I was young in the house. But something really amazing in the house is the Dr. Bernard's signature is written on the center hall. And so I always knew I wanted to leave the wood exposed in that room instead of covering it up. It had wallpaper over it throughout the years. But of course, we had to leave it exposed because of his signature, which is one of people's favorite parts of the house now.
So when did you make the decision to turn this originally a residential home into a lodging facility? How did that come to be? And did that change your renovation process at all?
Yes, it definitely changed the process. At the beginning, I tossed around all kind of things, including a general store or an event space, or I was bouncing everywhere, basically. But one thing we don't have here, or we don't have much of even in Northeast Louisiana in the area, is a nice, unique place to stay. We have more motels than hotels in the area, and along Highway 65, which is a really busy thoroughfare, and Bernard House sits on Highway 65, there isn't a nice place for a long time to be able to rest. I also think every little town needs a nice place to stay so that outsiders can experience it. So that's kind of how we landed there. I also have family in the business, in the hospitality business, which is it's kind of new and unexpected, but my cousin has done a few projects in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and then my aunt has a hotel in Covington. So I had some experience with how with lodging and with hosting people in that way. So it just kind of began to make sense. And I think, on the other side of it, that it's been a really good thing for, for people coming through. We have a lot of unexpected people. Actually, I just had a couple from Houston who were meeting their college age children from Ole Miss and Louisiana Tech there for the weekend just to hang out and relax, and they had a great time and left with a really nice experience here. So that was a real goal. One thing we had to do in particular to making it a lodging facility was every room had to have a bathroom. And it was built in 1884, so there were not bathroom spaces. A couple were added on, and I think around the 20s, but they weren't quite, they weren't up to the speed that we needed them to be for this space. So we used those and renovated those, and then we carved out 2 other bathrooms for the two other bedrooms. So that was really specific to the space. Also carving out a kitchen. We couldn't justify having one of the rooms be a kitchen. It's an old home, so the rooms are huge, right? So we couldn't justify having one whole room be a kitchen space. So I had to kind of carve out this cute little kitchen out of the back porch, which now I love. But at the time, it seemed like it was going to be too tight to be feasible. So things like that, and thinking about how people will use it. What are the common spaces that people will want? Because sometimes we have 2 different guests there, and sometimes we have the whole house is booked. So just trying to be creative and making spaces be flexible is probably the biggest consideration.
And since it's open, what has been some of the impact to you personally, as well as the community? What's been the reaction to this long, vacant, abandoned building now being functional and supporting commerce again in the area?
It's been really nice, and I've been amazed at how many people dreamt of redoing the house. It really has a certain pull to it, as old homes can and often do, that people were really drawn to before the renovation and then have really appreciated since. We've had people, just stop through to look at it because it stands out now as this really nice and new place on a road that hasn't had the most positive attention for a long time. So that's been nice. And, people have rented out the whole house for their baby showers and wedding parties and book signings and family reunions. And so it's been a real community gathering place of, those important life moments that, bind you not only to each other, but to a place. So I've been really grateful that we could have that for people here.
That's great. It really shows how you can turn, a negative into really a community gathering place, a place of pride, and, hopefully inspire others to do other improvements to their community as well.
Yeah, one thing that's nice is like showing people the before picture. I think, if people here didn't see it or remember it, looking at it just shows you too what's possible. Like you don't have to give up. Don't throw in the towel too quickly, with a little creativity and, frankly, a lot of elbow grease. You can do it. And that's another thing. Me personally, I am housekeeping most of the time. So it's not necessarily the role that I envisioned for myself, but COVID brought about some changes, and then just making it work, requires a lot more hands-on activity than I when I was imagining it than I imagined. But it's been really actually nice, and I put in my earbuds, whatever they are, earbuds. Sorry,
yeah.
I put in my earbuds while I'm there and just get after it. It's kind of cathartic. So
Great. So those are all the questions I have for today. Is there any other closing thoughts or comments you have, that or lessons you learned from this renovation, and or even just again, how it's impacting the neighborhood and the community, and any next steps for the Bernard House?
I have a lot of dreams. The property goes, we're going to be adding a dock soon on the lake because it's on the lake. So we're looking forward to adding that element. The lake is beautiful and I want people to be able to enjoy being out on it. And it's a big part of what connects the community. And then there's a big space behind it, which I'm dreaming. I'm now in like garden streaming phase because I love the idea of incorporating that since it was originally that. And, we're actually having a meeting there on Thursday night of a bunch of people in town who are interested in saving these old buildings and maybe doing something with them commerce wise. So I just think that it's important not to underestimate what just getting started does, just one thing, just do one thing. And then the effects of that, they may take a while. I don't know. They may never happen, but the satisfaction of actually getting started is really, it's life changing, and I'm grateful that my daughter who was born in the middle of it and is now 2 will know it as part of her story and, have that experience of being part of the community in that way. So I think it really matters.
Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks.